from Odoo. Odoo streamlines every aspect of a company into one simple business management platform. More information at odoo.com. And from the Heising Simons Foundation, unlocking knowledge, opportunity, and possibilities. More at hsfoundation. Science Friday organization dedicated to public access to science and scientific information. Learn more about their work at sciencefriday.com. Minute and a half away from 2 on a Friday afternoon, and we are waiting for the name of your
Hi there. Why are you going? Where are you going? Come on.
On the next item, the truck that we
Hi there. Hi there. Hi there. How do you? How you doing?
That's on the next item, and how I will.
Welcome back.
tomorrow morning at 9 followed by
Welcome back. Oh no way. Welcome back.
Comes from Metro.
Yeah.
Introducing the Flying Metro Fare Card.
Welcome back.
The system replaces the Metro King Fare Card. Plus, rail fares. Details at flymetro.org/fare system.
Welcome back.
And sunset happening at 6:02. Clear overnight, full around 53. Tomorrow sunrise at 7:07. Gorgeous weekend ahead. Sunny with 9 near 74. Tomorrow, Sunday, and Monday. A few showers on the 5th. Monday overnight into Tuesday. And then during Tuesday, we're expecting about a 50% chance of showers and storms. Highs around 72. Right now it's 73 degrees here at your NPR station, KUHF Houston, City 87. A service of the University of Houston.
2 o'clock? Really?
The Trump administration tries to shift its tone on immigration in Minnesota, but fear and mounting legal challenges remain. From WAMU and NPR in Washington, this is what it is. Hi, I'm Nyla Voodoo. Today on the Friday News Roundup,
All down 700
people
affected today.
what to expect from this change from the Trump administration. Also, the Supreme Court says California can use its new congressional map that favors Democrats, what that means for the midterms. And 300 journalists, a third of the staff, were laid off from the Washington Post, and they're speaking up. Email us your questions about the week's news, 1a@wamu.org. Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lisa Johnston. The Dow Jones Industrial Average crossed the 50,000 mark for the first time today. NPR's Scott Horsley reports today's rally on Wall Street has erased the losses from Thursday's sell-off.
Big tech companies like Alphabet and Amazon are investing hundreds of billions of dollars in artificial intelligence, and it's not entirely clear all that spending is going to pay off. Shares of both companies are down today, but the broader market is on a tear. The recent volatility in the stock market just highlights the uncertainty about AI's profit potential, as well as its effects on the job market.
That's NPR's Scott Horsley reporting. A federal judge in Boston has blocked a data sharing agreement between the Internal Revenue Service and federal immigration officials. NPR's Jude Johnby Block reports this is the second time a federal judge has ruled against efforts to use IRS data to find and deport people.
Last August, the IRS shared the addresses of 47,000 non-citizens with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. But a federal judge in D.C. found last year that data exchange was unlawful. Now a second federal judge, Boston, has blocked ICE and the Department of Homeland Security from inspecting or using that data and has paused the data sharing agreement while the case goes forward. The judge cited taxpayer privacy laws and also raised concerns about immigration agents misidentifying people and wrongfully arresting them at their homes. The DHS spokesperson told NPR the agency disagreed with the ruling and said the government was, quote, sharing information across the federal government to solve problems. Chief Jockey Block, NPR News.
A racist meme that President Trump had posted on his social media platform late last night has been removed. The president shared a video with election misinformation. It included an animation of former President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama
you turn on the signal?
Sirens.
Why? Stupid? Okay. Left turn, right. Oh, wow. It's my room. I don't care. So, let's go. Hey. Get away. Hey, my way.
previously known as
Oh,
inside
sorry.
in terms of the managed what's going on in Minneapolis. That's the law. Is immediate. And when the industry's trying to achieve its software, that's
Where's my Dodge? Where's my Dodge? Oh, I found it. Oh, Dodge. Try.
Version of ICE pickups of people in their target areas who have the same requirements. We're also seeing this unprecedented cooperation at all levels of the state, the government, that's the story respect. It's not just for
It's beautiful space.
edge to this. The president himself, despite saying, hey, we may have marching for also said he wasn't going to
Texting yesterday with the professor of Minneapolis and asking for a list, and she was saying it seems like not that much different. But let me ask about some other news. Several children face detention in Texas, including 5-year-old Leanne and grandmas, allowed to return home to Minnesota where their identities were assessed.
just mentioned his prior judge said he did this and had the difference of being state of Illinois is insane. In others,
I got a one sunset. I need more sunset. Subscribe to channel. Please.
What they've done and the fact that they've killed citizens don't like it. It's trying to get our evidence it's trying to escalate and set it those types of so it's a setback that was almost even with the backwards.
Let's talk
My
about
dogs.
elsewhere changes in
Hey,
Texas.
dogs.
Congress lawmakers are trying to agree
Hey,
to spend bills
dogs.
that keep DHS
What are
funded
you
tax
doing?
equity. Democrats have a clear message about what
What
they
are you
want.
doing? Go, Dodge. Where are you going? Dodge. See you, Dodge. I like you.
Carter, what specific restrictions are Democrats
Next target. Which next target? Where's next
Let's
target?
start with who
Oh,
faces
you know my target. So,
restricting the use of
see you.
police agents are throwing around
Okay. Next.
forced to arrest
Next.
to
Where's my target? Oh my goodness. Oh my god.
unraveling
Okay.
and a federal agent or law enforcement officer needs a search warrant. To arrest someone, ICE officers have been operating under the
Get out of here.
there should be more judicial.
Get away.
And also,
Oh.
the
Next.
Democrats to and to investigate federal agents if they believe that their actions have been
So another key thing here is that this is happening in Congress because Republicans are going along with it because Trump told them to, because he doesn't like how things are going with this administration. It would have been unthinkable that Democrats would say, we demand first the ICE, and then Republicans would say, okay, we'll separate DHS funding from the rest of our appropriations. Well, but that's
Oh my gosh.
because Trump gave them
Oh, it's a
his
very
blessing
heavy
to do it. Now, whether he
topic
did it
here.
together, it seems like a puppy,
Seems
but
like it's
ICE funding, ICE funding, but DHS funding is going to be up in the air, potentially for a long
Gesture.
time.
Right, well, it allows
But this
DHS
time-
funding paid for ongoing immigration operations.
That's nothing really. They already gave billions of dollars to ICE in their big tax cut bill, but that was paid for with those Medicaid cuts. But other important things at DHS, such as FEMA and TSA, would be affected. And, FEMA is really important in lots of places, and that's politically risky. And we don't know how Democrats have decided how they're going to handle that. They have a deadline at the end of next week to pass a bill to fund DHS, and that's their leverage.
Steve Berger mentioned body cameras. Christy Nolan, Homeland Security Secretary, said all immigration officers in Minneapolis will now wear body cameras. How significant is that?
Don't
Look, I
carry
think it's
me.
significant because the body cams, the officers have to turn those body cams on under order
Look
for
at
any
cutting.
at-large arrests or searches or, executing search warrants
Don't
and
carry
whatnot.
me.
Problem is, it's not for all ICE officers.
Right, it's just for
Just for
Minneapolis.
Minneapolis.
Right.
So it is significant, and it's one of the items as it goes critics. Look, it's not just Democrats who want this. We also have a great Republicans who saw the death of 2 U.S. citizens and said, this is ridiculous. Many gun rights owners are furious. The administration was facing major pushback from many of their in their own base, looking at this thing. How did this happen? And when you kind of look at the videos that are out there, many folks are saying this can't continue to happen. So the body cam element is an important. I think it's part of the softer touch that the administration is trying to bring this. It's important to recognize it is not system-wide. They have not made that commitment yet. That's one of the calls that Democrats are requiring to get back to DHS funding.
Earlier we mentioned polling. There's a new NPR PBS News Marist poll that shows a jump in disapproval for Trump's handling of immigration. 2/3 of Americans now say ICE has gone quote, ICE has quote gone too far. That's an 11% increase from last summer. Margaret, is that all driven by Republican voters?
No, watch the numbers, watch the volume. You're right, this is a really interesting poll. That number 65%
Please
of
make
Americans
my
say ICE has
room.
gone too far. Look at the numbers.
Please make my room.
The Republican base has largely stayed with President Trump. We do have now 27% of Republicans saying they think ICE is going too far, but independents are the number to watch.
Got
That shift
it.
in independents, 7 out of 10 independents now saying they think ICE has gone too far. And why are independents important? Independents are important, of course, because at least in theory, they are potential swing voters, and you've got hugely consequential midterms where it may be viewed as a referendum on President Trump. If you see some of those independents who voted for Trump in 2024 because they wanted him to get a tough level of order, but they don't like this, if you see them either staying home or backing Democrats, that will be a new trend to watch this.
Yeah, that's how you lose an election.
And how closely do you think in Congress people are watching that polling right now in this midterm?
You know, Congress was always worried, Republicans in Congress were always worried about potentially losing House. In the last few days, we're seeing new data points that suggest potentially greater concern about losing the Senate. I think that's tougher for Democrats to pull off, but now seems possible because of President Trump and his policies.
We're rounding up the week's news with Margaret Tolliver, senior contributor for Axios, Steve Clemens, editor-at-large at The National Interest, Arthur Tlaney, senior reporter for HuffPost.
My room.
You're hearing the music of Bad Bunny there, one of a number of artists at the Grammys on Sunday who spoke up against ICE and immigration operations. Bad Bunny's also set to perform the Super Bowl halftime show this weekend when the Seattle Seahawks go up against the New England Patriots in California. We talked about Bad Bunny on the Live Record Club this week.
Don't call
That
me.
conversation is on our website, 1A.org. I will say I, for one, have been invited to more Bad Bunny watch parties this year than the Super Bowl game. But Margaret, I know you're going to be watching the actual game.
Don't
my
call
husband's
me,
a
man.
Seahawks fan. If Washington's not in it, I'm with the Seahawks.
We'll be back with more
Please.
on immigration and lots of other news in a moment. You're listening to 1A from WAMU and NPR.
What happened?
Please send us your emails, 1A@WAMU.org.
What are you doing? 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 Please. Oh, it's an accident? Or... Oh, great. Bad car.
2:18 on Friday afternoon. You're listening to the Friday News Roundup here
Friday
on your NPR
afternoon.
station. News 87. 76 Fahrenheit, 24 Celsius right now. Here at the Image. So with more on the weather,
It's
ABC
Friday
meteorologist.
afternoon.
We've got gorgeous weather through the weekend. Waking up each morning, temperatures will be in the upper 40s, and with a good amount of sunshine, we'll gradually warm up into the mid-70s. So both Saturday and Sunday are looking absolutely beautiful. Very similar to what we're seeing today, which is another gorgeous day, but it won't last forever. By Monday, we'll bring back winds, some moisture, some fog, some cloud cover. And by Tuesday, rain chances are back on the rise. I'm ABC 13 meteorologist Kevin Roth for News 88.7.
Mike Tirico will host two of the most watched sporting events in the world this Sunday, the Super Bowl and the Olympics. Why do so many watch?
You can put aside your differences, however long that game is, and be on the same team. And I think deep down in our souls, we like that as humans, as Americans.
NBC's Mike Tirico, Saturday on Weekend Edition from NBC.
It's underway 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, followed by Planet Money and How I Built This at 9, and Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me at 10 o'clock.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from listeners like you and from St. Arnold Brewing Company, a place for corporate events on tap, media rooms, full catering available, or at starnold.com. Support comes from Base Power. As hurricane season approaches, Base Power offers energy fees to Texans with home backup for outages and fixed energy rates. Eligibility details at basepowercompany.com/NPR.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Imaginable Futures, envisioning a future where learning
Don't cut me.
and thriving belongs to everyone. Learn more at imaginablefutures.com. From the Doris Duke Foundation, which aims to support the well-being of people and the planet for a more creative, equitable, and sustainable future. And from the Skoll Foundation, dedicated to powering social movements to transform the world. Learn more at skoll.org.
It's a Friday News Roundup we do each week on 1A. We like to challenge you with our news quiz. And last week we asked, what was the vital piece of equipment that failed and caused Challenger explosion? The answer is the O-ring seal. Congratulations to our winner, Sean Manning. Your 1A swag is on the way. Now to this week's question. McDonald's announced it will have a unique food pairing for Valentine's Day this month. What are they offering as an add-on to chicken nuggets? Leave us your answer using the 1A Vox Pop app. You can email us 1a@wamu.org. We're accepting entries until midnight on Sunday night. Please, no Googling. Good luck. Let's get back to the roundup now with Steve Clemens, editor-at-large of National Interest, Arthur Delaney, senior reporter for HuffPost, and Margaret Topp, senior contributor for Axios and director of Syracuse University's Institute for Democracy, Journalism, and Citizenship. We heard a few minutes ago the emotional voices of the brothers of Renee Maplin Good. They spoke at a Department of Homeland Security Use of Force forum this week. Arthur, we were talking about the idea of investigating these deaths. The DHS Inspector General is investigating the use of force by ICE. Congressional Democrats have urged them to leave. What is the investigation like this entail?
Well, I think they basically get the facts, and some agency watchdogs have ignored criminal investigation, and this would basically be a later fallout of something that we all already saw on video. So I don't know how much it eventually reaches a conclusion. This is a watchdog that has been accused of misconduct and claimed it was substantiated during the Biden administration. He opted not to remove him, but he's not one of the more recent Trump lackeys, so it could wind up being a very authoritative report. But I think the fact that these excessive use of force were so thoroughly documented from multiple angles that we've all already seen, we know what happened in these incidents.
We have an email from Al in Massachusetts who's asking, how can we push Congress to make it possible to sue federal agents for violations of civil rights and property damage? Arthur, what kind of lawsuits are options?
You already can file an administrative claim with DHS, like with the Justice Department, and then you can sue if they deny it. But Democrats had actually had this on their earlier lists of demands when I was speaking to certain lawmakers, such as Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut, increasing liability for immigration agents. And then they left that off of the written list that they produced on Wednesday evening. So apparently they're not gunning for that right now.
Steve, as we talk about investigations, Democrats in Colorado are asking for an independent probe into recent actions by ICE in Eagle County. Agents allegedly left so-called death cards, customized Ace of Spades playing cards at the scenes where they had detained immigrants. This practice has its roots in the Vietnam War explain?
So this is a hackles on the back of the neck weird story where, during the Vietnam War, after our forces joined forces with our allies, after Viet Cong were killed, they would leave an ace of spades on the doorstep of the person who was killed, indicating that family that might happen. What's happened in Colorado, we have photos of these ace of spades cards in Denver field tablets for those people who've been taken and detained by ICE and left in their cards. So it's an incredibly eerie gesture, and you had both senators from Colorado, House members, come in and send a note to Christine and say it's absolutely unacceptable to use this historic means of intimidation of Latino community.
Well, and also what was used during war against
an enemy.
A foreign enemy.
Yes, and
Connoting
Fucking
kill
Tesla.
yes, connoting death, right?
It speaks to the G.I. Joe mindset that apparently exists in the heads of a lot of these immigration enforcement agents. And it's one of
But
the...
it's not just a mindset of people printing out cards and placing them. That also speaks to a culture that's I don't know what.
It's exactly this sort of like lack of professionalism that it's rated with a uniform.
It's not only lack of professionalism, Arthur, it is a pursuit of a kind of milieu where this kind of action is celebrated. It's kind of part of the esprit de corps of targeting and setting this.
But during war, also, I was going to say, right?
It's
Yeah.
extremely threatening. And I was talking Democrats list of demands that would add the ace of spades card to the
It's in there. They want a uniform code of conduct. They want uniforms. They don't want them running around with guns like they're doing. And yes, unprofessional is perhaps the overly polite way to describe it.
We also saw this week a federal judge stopping President Trump's attempt to end temporary protected status for Haitians. This would have affected about 350,000 people living here legally who sought refuge from their home country. The Trump administration says it made all the way to the Supreme Court. Let's just talk first about why the administration has targeted this group in particular.
Because they're black. You remember during the campaign when they were saying the Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio are eating the cats and eating the dogs that carried forward into the administration. A judge said you did this for no other reason than hostility to non-white immigrants. And I think that's pretty obvious in the case.
Are Haitians still at risk of being deported in the near term?
I think, given the history and record of immigration in this country, culturally, the administration's position has been that the Haitian program has become a de facto asylum program and that it shouldn't have been, it wasn't intended to be. But given some of the strong long-standing comments about what his house is or his views on certain populations in certain cities, it does, you have to take that context into consideration.
See, can you put this in legal context for us? Where else have we seen courts step in to rein administration's immigration action?
I think quite a lot of action trying to blocking some of these removal of temporary protected status. They've done this successfully so far with Venezuelans under temporary protected status. 1.5 million Venezuelans in the country, but also from Sudan, Nicaragua, Nepal, El Salvador, Honduras, and Cuba are part of that dimension. And there's been a kind of look at it. There's a battle going on between the administration over a lot of these issues. But I think the other dimension, which I think is really a reverse. We don't know what the status is on this, but asylum seeking process has not been completely suspended at the border, and judges have ruled that can't be there. I'm not familiar with who gets to make those claims.
Right, which was suspended after the National Guard troop member was killed. When we look back at Minnesota and we think about the flood of immigration cases putting enormous pressure on prosecutors and judges there, how is the judicial system?
That's remarkable. We saw like this week. Step out the prosecutor in St. Paul just happened to be talking to a judge and saying this job sucks. I don't know what to do. I'm paraphrasing this. Just the system's broken. I can't. There's only so much I can do within the system.
what the ICE teaches. You know, people like Ferris Stockman and others in the New York Times have written extensively on how broken the legal system is when it comes to processing asylum claims. It's so many years backed up, and candidly, the Biden administration did not to figure out ways to resource that function. And so you have an ongoing so it's adding more of the stress or already stressed out legal system regarding any kind of immigration, but also asylum applications.
Let's wrap up the immigration conversation with one more email from Reed, who says, forget about administrative charges. The killing of Alex Preddy was obviously murder. When will we learn the names of the killers? When will they be criminally charged? Someone must be
Republica did report the names of the officers involved. I don't remember them off the top of my head, but the names are out there. Accountability.
Let's go to the latest voting elections. Wednesday, the Supreme Court said California can use its new congressional maps in upcoming midterm elections. The maps give Democrats a competitive edge, leaving the key for the party to pick up as many as 5 seats. The court denied an emergency request from the California Republican Party to block the maps. A reminder that voters in California approved these new boundaries last year following Texas's adoption of a Republican-friendly redistricting plan. Arthur, so what's the significance of this move from the court? Does it set a broader precedent for redistricting challenges?
I believe it says that states can go ahead with brazenly partisan gerrymandering to advantage the ruling party whenever they want. They don't need to wait for the census or anything. Am I overstating it? I think that's what we're voting on here.
Can we talk about Texas, where Democrats flipped a seat in the state Senate in a special election runoff on Saturday? It was a surprising victory ahead of the midterms in November. Democrat Taylor Grommet beat Republican Lay Wangus in a district that favored Trump by 17 points in 2024. See, what do we know about how Democrats flipped the seat? And Texas is a red state.
It's a red state, but it's more than a red state. This district has not changed in, I think, over 3 decades. I think it's 30 years. And the numbers are staggering. 57%, about 100,000 people voted. 57% went for Grommet. 43% went for the other candidate, GOP candidate. And this was a case where the governor of Texas, Governor Abbott, and Trump weighed in very strongly in the election, trying to turn this around. So it's not just a casual election. Oh, Democrat up and reversed the trend. They threw a lot of themselves, the president and the governor in this, and they lost it. And this has given a lot of Democrats about the upcoming election. It sent chills down the spine of many Republicans looking at the midterms coming.
I was in Texas last week, and I will tell you the commercials are kind of bonkers in terms of election commercials already running on the airwaves, on the radio, on YouTube. Margaret, what advantage does this win give Democrats in the midterms?
And we'll don't forget Texas's primaries in the U.S. Senate race are coming. So, look, what does a state runoff race do? It sort of depends. It certainly could juice Democratic enthusiasm and turnout. It could also give a roadmap if the key is turning out Latino and suburban voters who are unhappy with Donald Trump. The real question is, can Democrats win the U.S. Senate race in Texas? If they could, it could flip control of the Senate and create a whole dynamic of momentum. And Texas has been such an important ally for presidential border policies. We like that Texas can make into larger AAA and some of that's
We have a number of listeners asking about the potential for midterms to happen at all. Helen in North Carolina asks, do you think we will actually have midterm elections, or will it just be performative elections with troops guarding blue districts? Susan notes in an email, the executive branch acts as if there will be no more elections. We did hear President Trump talking about the idea of nationalizing elections. Margaret, can you explain a little bit more about that?
Well, legal experts and many Republicans themselves say that can't be done because the Constitution gives that power to the states and Congress. But one of the big political questions has been, will the president try anyway and by what means? And one of the concerns that I think they're getting from the listeners is the idea of ICE, like could ICE agents or other federal agents be deployed around polling locations? Would that intimidate or block people from voting?
Well, right, we heard Caroline Levitt say on Thursday, the White House, quote, can't guarantee an ICE agent won't be around polling locations, end quote.
Right. So obviously that would be an intimidating and perhaps violent factor, depending on what happens. So the question is, even if there's no mechanism by which to formally nationalize an election, what federal assets could you put toward elections in a way that would shape the outcome? Would that be legal or not? Who would challenge it? Who would prosecute it? Would it matter? What happens next? A lot of unanswered questions at this time.
Let's hear actually just the President talking about this from an interview with NBC News.
We need to put in federal controls as opposed to state controls. Remember this, they're really an agent. They're really accumulating the votes for an election. If they can't do it honestly and it can't be done properly and timely, then something else has to happen.
I think that he'll definitely do weird stuff. He's saying he did it in 2020, but it was in some ways a little silly. They were laughed out of courts, and the ability to execute his plans, like with immigration, will be, I think, a reason for some optimism. But obviously, we'll have to be vigilant. I mean, he says what he wants, and we know what he wants.
Well, this also, that said, you've got to understand, and I spent a lot of time talking to Republicans in Congress and the Senate, etc. And there's no appetite for this. He will find that they will bite him back if he proceeds. The biggest advocates of states' rights in this area, frankly, or candidly, are more Republicans in my view. And so I think that's going to be a real challenge for the White House.
Right, like with the 2020 scheme, still the election, only the least competent people were willing to do that. And everyone else in the Justice Department said, we'll all quit. This is a stupid and illegal plan. And I think that's a similar dynamic that we can count on. And the least competent people have not proven successful so far this year, or last year.
Margaret, we do see a bleak reality among election officials since 2020. Around 50% of top election officials in at least 11 states left their roles amid increasingly violent threats and harassment. What do you think the consequences of that will be?
Well, the consequences could certainly be that the people who replace them could be less adherent to the rules and norms in a way that transcends partisanship, and it's deeply concerning for election officials around the country.
We're rounding up the week's news. Margaret Pollock, senior contributor for Axios, director of Syracuse University's Institute for Democracy, Journalism, and Citizenship. She's with Steve Clemens, editor-at-large of the National Interest, and Arthur Delaney, senior reporter for BuzzFeed. I'm Nyla Boodoo. This is 1A. Keep your questions and comments coming. 1A at WAMU.com.
On Friday afternoon, news and Friday News Roundup on 1A here on your NPR station, News and Answer.
CDC has been alerting the nation about health threats far less frequently since President Trump returned to office. That is worrying many doctors and public health authorities.
These are early warning systems. Is the weatherman public health? There's an enormous situation of awareness.
I'm Juana Summers. How the slowing trickle of alerts is impacting the health agency. On All Things Considered from NPR News.
We'll have local and state legends. Another government shutdown is one. Federal agencies are funded, all except for Homeland Security. Both parties must now decide whether to try and leverage those funds to change President Trump's immigration policy. Also, politically charged conversation over how they agree with Sarah Israel.
public radio and seeks to help NPR produce programming that meets the highest standards of public service in journalism and cultural expression. And from Ula, a cloud-based phone service for any size business, with an automated virtual receptionist, video meetings, and other features to connect to customers and coworkers anywhere at ula.com/NPR. This is the Friday News Roundup. Further Delaney, senior reporter for HuffPost, Margaret Tollef, senior contributor for Axios, and Steve Clements, editor of Virgin Media. Let's stay with election news for just a moment more. Last week, the FBI raided an elections office in Fulton County, Georgia, seizing truckloads of 2020 voting ballots. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard was on the scene. She defended her actions in a letter to Congress on Monday, saying President Trump personally asked her to be there. Gabbard also confirmed a conflict between Trump, the FBI, and herself after the raid. She was in the headlines for another reason this week as well. After months of delays, an intelligence community watchdog forwarded a highly classified whistleblower complaint to congressional leaders that include allegations of wrongdoing by Gabbard. Steve, what do we know about these allegations or about this whistleblower?
We don't know a lot because the content of the complaint apparently is chock-a-block with very seriously classified information, and even the disclosure to the intel gang and it was redacted. So it was Senator Tom Robbins, Senator Marco, and others have not seen the underlying complaint. They've seen that the general purpose of this was by the whistleblower was to say that Tulsi Gabbard restricted the distribution of something very important because of political reasons. So we know that. We know that there's now a partisan divide. Paul Porter and others, Jim Himes, are saying we want to know more. And we know that Tom Cotton and others on the Republican side saying there's nothing more.
Over the weekend, the Justice Department released more than 3 million pages and thousands of photos and videos related to the investigation into the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The documents reference the president, other powerful figures like Elon Musk, Bill Clinton, Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates. What new details emerged from this latest release?
Well, I would say that from a criminal perspective, I think there are allegations by young women that were not followed through, which is remarkable. Some of them that were not investigated. President Trump mentioned President Trump were not investigated. But if you kind of remove those from normal, what we see is salacious commentary and actions from a lot of name brand people, including Finance Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick, Peter Attia, who's one of the celebrities that Mary Weiss is committed to bringing on as a commentator on CBS News. I won't repeat what he said in these comments, but pretty graphically awful comments from CBS taking steps to actually discontinue that relationship with Trump here. So we see a lot of basically web of connections, an extraordinary web of connections among the powerful, but nothing by which criminal. And then on top of that, lots of unredacted stuff of innocent women. It's remarkable that they've essentially crowdsourced redaction to America and the world. And complaining about photos.
So not just photos.
Bank information.
Private, right, bank information of victims, names, faces, very sloppily, not at all, or not all redacted. The DOJ said on Monday it had withdrawn thousands of these documents. They also say they dropped the ball here, Margaret. How could this happen?
Well, by the DOJ's account, this was an oversight. It was a mistake, and the massive volume.
Big mistake.
It was a big mistake. And the massive volume of documents they had to go through was how they're explaining if you slip through. I think the sort of credibility gap, the issue that is not satisfying people about this explanation, especially the victims, is that there are many documents that appear still to have been redacted that involve communications with Attorney General Campani or FBI Director Kash Patel or other administration officials. And so I think one of the questions is, did these slip through the cracks because they were actually more focused on protections and redactions for federal officials? And so,
As opposed to
that's right. And we did see, you saw a judge schedule a hearing over this and then cancel it because there was an agreement already
mark on the wall that he was able to heal, great to heal the former president of the United States. He is, through a lot of steps that he has taken, has moved very methodically, and from their viewpoint, it's been irresponsible. But Democrats did Peter Navarro, as Orphan just talked about, others that were held in contempt and sent to jail. But, I happen to see President Clinton every once in a while, and he's been joking for the last year that they were going to try and send him to jail, and that they would hope that they would send him somewhere in the world's war. And so there's been this ongoing knowing tension on both sides, and Comer's using his power of this moment to heal the former president, but it's opening a door that many people are looking at. If you've now broken open Pandora's box of bringing that, what lies in the future for those people, now President Trump and even President Trump himself?
And the Clintons, all they have to do is talk, and they're good at that. And they're even bragging that make it public.
Right, so Hillary Clinton set to testify February 26th. Bill Clinton scheduled for the next day. What do we know about the details of that?
Those will be private depositions that will be transcribed, and it will transfer the video sometime after. That's totally typical. We want a public hearing. I talked to James Cameron this week. He'd love that. And he would. I'm surprised. I think the Clintons are using that to try to throw sin in his face. That they would not really want the public hearing because this is embarrassing.
And it's also important to remember that Comer succeeded in getting Democrats on board for this. And the reason that they're doing that is because they have an appetite for the future.
I spoke to a senior Democrat on this committee, Stephen Lips, said, well, there's Bill Clinton's in pictures with this guy. And part of the whole Epstein scandal is his leveraging relationships to appear legit at all times. That's why he wanted people like Bill Clinton and Bill Gates around him, so that people would forget he's a convicted sex offender.
I think that Clintons have managed to find a little bit of weird silver lining in the way Comer's played this, because the coverage, especially Bill Clinton, has been so bad in recent weeks around this, and both of the Clintons are trying to refuse to testify, and the storyline emerging at the end of the week is Clinton's champion testimony before cameras. They want, full disclosure and sunlight, and but we'll see what happens.
Our guest today, Margaret Talleb of Syracuse University's Institute for Democracy, Journalism, and Citizenship, Arthur Delaney of HuffPost, and Steve Clemens of The National Interest. On Wednesday, weeks of anxiety about impending cuts at the Washington Post culminated in many's worst fears. The paper laid off about a third of its staff, including more than 300 from the newsroom. Jada Ewen, who wrote arts and culture features, was lost their jobs.
I have colleagues who are in Ukraine who are going to have to come back, colleagues who are in Jerusalem. We had a foreign editor quit because so much of the staff was decimated. And for our section, basically arts coverage that doesn't involve Trump has been eliminated.
Ruth Marcus, who spent more than 4 decades at the Post as a reporter, editor, and columnist, wrote in The New Yorker, quote, "When Jeff Bezos purchased the Post, his net worth was about $25 billion. It's now an estimated $250 billion. Why not 1% of that for the Post, enough to sustain the paper indefinitely? A pipe dream, I know, but this arrangement would make Bezos a savior of the Post, not the man who presided over his demise," end quote. I heard a lot of that sentiment yesterday at a rally I went to outside the Post's building on Thursday in D.C.
These layoffs are shameful.
That was John Schlois, the president of the News Guild, which operates the Post Union. Let's just talk about reaction to what unfolded at the Post this week. Arthur, you want to start?
These are the most demoralizing mass media layoffs that I've ever.
And I was saying, in the history of I've had a lot of been around a lot of demoralizing newspaper layoffs. I
have been personally, my company's done layoffs a bunch of times, and it's incredibly frightening and upsetting. And somehow, this institution just impaling itself. They were so well positioned after the first Trump administration. They had such good leadership, and they made these insane decisions to basically insult their core readers when they spiked the Kamala Harris endorsement, which nobody would, who would have even blinked? Oh, they endorsed Kamala Harris. That's what they do on the editorial page, and it seemed so unnecessary. Even with all the challenges facing media and the decline of ad revenue, this was a pillar of journalism, one of the most famous institutions in the country's history, and it's just a terrible and unnecessary seeming outcome.
Margaret, can you put on your hat as for president of the White House Correspondents Association, just sort of a sense of what this...
Well, this is, one of the most important newspapers in terms of Watergate coverage, and so much of the Post reputation in the decades since has been built on that robust coverage of American politics, of local news, of international news. I had as director of an institute that studies the relationship between the media ecosystem and the strength of democratic governance say that I think, as Arthur mentioned, there are a lot of trends hurting the ability of news organizations to survive. We haven't even talked about AI yet, but just subscriptions and the way we consume news. The problem for credibility when it comes to Jeff Bezos is he's also who owns a bunch of other companies, or is the founder of a bunch of other companies that are worth a lot more of his net worth than the Washington Post. And the more robust the Post coverage is, the harder it is for him to continue making money on those other businesses. And Amazon MGM was in the news quite recently for spending $75 million to acquire and market this Melania Trump, that will never make back a fraction of the $75 million spent. So if you're at the Washington Post, you're thinking, how much of this is really about profit margins or business? It's a credibility problem, and it has exposed the real risk in news organizations on relying on billionaires as owners.
We're facing a real problem, not only in media being owned by billionaires and people looking for the benevolent billionaire who's going to come save this public good. We're seeing battles over with Netflix and Time Warner and all of these other things where they're I think the notion that whether it's in entertainment or communications or news media, right now the billionaire class, which Donald Trump has decided to favor some and not favor others based on what his interaction with them, has created not only a Washington Post crisis, but a crisis in a lot of other areas. So this is a deep structural problem in the United States right now. It takes us back to the robber barons, in my view, early on, and whether or not they're going to be brought around. And as we see the kind of decimation of support, of tax dollar support for a lot of national media, a problem with media writ large. And
Bezos was with Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, this week. He wasn't putting his face on these layoffs. He was with the Trump administration, where he's got big-time contracts for his rocket company.
Let's do one final story. On Sunday, President Trump announced he plans to shut down the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts for 2 years for renovation starting in July. The announcement raised major unanswered questions about funding, congressional approval, and what happens to the employees, artists, and resident organizations like the National Symphony Orchestra. Steve, what do we understand about why President Trump is doing this?
Well, President Trump said he got $257 million appropriated for reconstruction, so everything's on set to do that. What we also know is that major artists, Lin-Manuel Miranda, others have pulled their projects and presence from the Kennedy Center after he put his name on the Kennedy Center in protest of it. So you have declining subscriptions, declining donations. The Kennedy Center itself has to raise about $80 million in addition to other sources of incomes, and that has been just falling precipitously. So people suspect, it's different than what Trump says, that it's because they can't make the place work or operate, so they're going to close it for 2 years, and who knows when they'll do it. And the president sees himself to give them a moment as one of the great builder presidents of all time. They got the ballroom, they want to have the Arc of Triumph out there. Now they have the Kennedy Center. We don't.
Speaking of the arts, let's just end the show honoring the beloved actress Catherine O'Hara, who passed away last Friday at 71 years old. Her breakout role was on the 70s and 80s Canadian sketch comedy Second City Television. She met her husband of 30-plus years on the set of the cult classic Beetlejuice.
If you don't let me gut out this house and make it my own, I will go insane and I will take you with me.
She played a forgetful mom on Home Alone.
Come on.
And another mom, a role that earned her an Emmy, Moira Rose in the hit series Schitt's Creek.
It is all but impossible.